77 WABC invites you to a family fun day and softball showdown on July 20th with net proceeds benefiting Shriners Children's. John Sterling will call the game as the FDNY takes on the NYPD with special guests Dwight Gooden, Art Shamsky, 77 WABC hosts including Sid Rosenberg, Anthony Cumia, Lionel, Dominic Carter, and many more. For more info and to buy tickets, go to ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. That's ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. Attention Ditto Heads. Attention Bo Scouts.
Goes by the pseudonym Bo Snerdley.
It's time for the Soul of Excellence.
He is a radio host here in New York.
The Rush Hour is on the air.
Rush.
Now here's James Golden.
Welcome, my friends, to the Thursday edition of Bo Snerdley's Rush Hour, the fastest hour in American media. And today, my friends, I hope that I don't get too far down into the weeds, the political. I said that to Jonas right before the show started. He said, what are you, smoking weed? No, I'm not smoking weed. I haven't smoked weed since I was a young thing. And when I did smoke, I inhaled. Unlike Billy Blue Dress. But that has been decades and decades and decades and even more decades ago.
What about edibles?
Don't do it. That's your generation. And no vaping of that stuff either. That's your generation, my friend. But I hope I don't get too far in the weeds because some things have happened overnight that I think I would like to try to put in a context. Namely, what is going on with the Senate parliamentarian and how that's affecting the big, beautiful bill and all of that stuff. I will say that for the next 2 days, you can expect, ladies and gentlemen, that the courts are going to dominate political headlines. I know what happened in New York is still a big deal, and yes, it is going to continue to be a big deal. There are stories about the panic that some national Democrats find themselves in right now. In fact, I hope I can get to this story today. If not, I'll hold it till tomorrow. This woman, this freshman Senator Slotkin out of Michigan, is now presenting herself as a centrist, and she's come up with a centrist plan. She made a big speech today and how Democrats can reclaim the political center. They're not going to listen to her. But it's still fun to see, including in her thing, stop vilifying the rich. Things like that. So you know automatically that they will never stop. They will never listen to her. But she's actually seeing some points that the Democrats are hurting themselves. This guy that they have in New York is not going to help them. And he may end up being the mayor, which would be a scary thing. But we had a ruling this morning from the Supreme Court about Planned Parenthood, which I totally celebrated. The ruling, 6-3 ruling, the three liberal ladies on the Supreme Court, I have to watch myself not to say certain things that might sound disrespectful. The three liberal justices as ladies held firm, so to speak, and they were outvoted by 6-3 decision. South Carolina wanted to say that South Carolina basically wanted to defund the Planned Parenthood. And the Supreme Court pretty much went along with it. Of course, liberals are having a conniption fit about that. Planned Parenthood, you see, draws more than a third of the revenue that they get from government grants, contracts, and Medicaid reimbursements for quote-unquote non-abortion care. But South Carolina said, listen, we are going to pretty much disallow Planned Parenthood from collecting Medicaid, and the Supreme Court went along with it. So, big deal there. that was a big case. There are 6 other cases that are left, and tomorrow is it. Tomorrow, unless they do, last year, they went to the end, and then they decided a case in July, early July. That almost never happens. Usually the end of the June is it for the Supreme Court. We're out of here. We're going on vacation. See you later. Alligator. Don't smile. Crocodiles. We're out. So if the pattern holds true, the usual pattern, tomorrow will be the last day of this session of the Supreme Court. In the final days, the biggest decision that is going to be made in this term will be the birthright citizenship case, and that not only because it is the birthright citizen case, but because the issue involves whether these local judges, these district judges, can issue nationwide injunctions. That is at the heart of this birthright case. And so the Supreme Court can actually, and this is, I think, what people are expecting, the Supreme Court can finally clamp down on this over-judicious use of injunctions. Court observers also believe that the court is likely to side with Maryland parents in a religious rights case over some of these LGBTQ plus whatever books that are in school. Some of them are nothing more, and I'm not saying all of them. I have not read all of them. I haven't read any of them, frankly. It's not in my line of interest there in terms of books. And I don't have to read to the young'uns. I have young'uns. Their parents read to them. And in fact, my nephew was reading one of these books to his son and had to stop reading it midway and start trying to make up a story because all of a sudden it turned into what was supposed to be a very benign kind of book, started turning into a story about 2 little boys. About what then?
Boy wanting long, luxurious hair.
A boy wanting long, luxurious, girly hair. All right, excuse me. Same difference. Anyway. And a purple wig. A boy wanting yeah, so same difference. Indoctrination. Anyway, the case in Maryland County, and of course it comes from Montgomery County, which is the most liberal. I have talked about this before. Montgomery County might as well be in Californicate. It is the same kind of mentality there that you get in liberal-infested California. And that liberals have overrun. Conservatives they don't stand a chance in Montgomery County. Some of the most ridiculous things that come out of the East Coast come out of Montgomery County, Maryland. Prince and Knight and Uncle Bobby's Wedding introduced those storybooks, and there are, parents that want to be able to opt out. And Maryland, Montgomery County says, no, you cannot, as a parent, opt your kid out of these subject materials. No, we're going to force you and force your kid to have to participate in this. So that's at the Supreme Court. Hopefully, by the end of tomorrow, parents will be able to object to some of the things that the liberals in Montgomery County want to shove down kids' throats. Also, a 3-year battle goes on over borders in Louisiana. It's more election stuff. And there's a Texas law that's got up from the Supreme Court aimed at blocking kids from seeing online pornography. Do you honestly think that, yes, there are forces in America that want to be able to preserve the right of kids to view online pornography? Now, more court stuff. This I love. I will stand up and cheer. Oh, I'm going to get to the Senate stuff, folks. The Senate stuff gets in the weeds. Because in order to really understand what's going on in the Senate, and I don't know how much in the weeds I can get in this stuff today. I'd love to do the whole thing, but I could do 2 shows on it because it takes you back to the reconciliation bills, which were put in place to reduce the deficit. They have done nothing but expand the deficit, but the reconciliation bill process, 1974 is where all this stuff started. Then it gets into the Byrd rule, and the Byrd rule gets into why now you have this parliamentarian, Miss McDonald, who is saying, no, niet. You can't do that. And people, Republicans are ticked off. They're saying, fire this woman, some of them. Fire her. So I did some research. When has a Senate parliamentarian been fired? It has happened. And I was shocked at who did it. Trent Lott fired the Senate parliamentarian back in the day. Harry Reid, who said that Obama was good. Obama was, let me see how he said. He speaks the Negro dialect, and he's articulate. Yes, that's Senate Democrat, former Democrat, deceased now, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Harry Reid appointed this parliamentarian, but it gets a little complex. Meanwhile, let me just get to this since we were on Maryland. Hallelujah Justice Department. Pam Bondi's Justice Department is now suing 15 federal district court judges in Maryland. The entire Maryland bunch is now under a lawsuit. Legal experts describe this as an unprecedented, quote-unquote, attack on judicial independence. It is nothing. It is actually a defense of executive power, is what it is, not an attack on the judiciary. Longtime court watchers say they could not recall another instance in which the Justice Department, which usually represents members of the judicial branch in court, sued the entire roster of judges in a district. Well, there are good reasons. And you have this guy who's a Trump hater. This guy, J. Michael Luttig, used to be on the Court of Appeals on the Fourth Circuit. He says it's reckless and irresponsible, and yet another direct frontal assault on the federal courts of this country. The federal courts have been doing nothing but frontal and backwards and sideways attack on Donald Trump. And right now, enough is enough. Now, it may interest you to learn a little bit about this district. The governor in Maryland, Westmore, he's upset after blatantly violating judicial orders and directing personal attacks on individual judges. The White House is turning our Constitution on its head by suing the judges themselves. There is no constitutional prohibition against the executive branch suing the judicial members of the judiciary for overreach. I don't know what he's talking about. But here's the thing. When you really come down to what's going on with these Maryland judges, check this out. As reported, I think, was it WAPO that did this? Yeah. This is the Washington Post story. Unlike other judicial districts with a mix of Democratic and Republican nominees serving on the bench, 13 of the 15 federal judges sitting in Maryland were nominated by Presidents Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, or Joe Biden, all Democrats. 2 judges were nominated by Republicans, one Trump, the other Bush 43. They're all Democrats, and they're all partisan hacks. And so, not all of them, I should take that back. I don't know all of them, haven't read every ruling. But the ones that have been coming out appear to be partisan in nature. Self-corrected. And the DOJ has had enough. Right on, brothers and sisters. BLs. Total Guitar Magazine said this and this day in 2008. This rendition of Twist and Shout, first recorded by the Top Notes, was one of the best cover songs of all time. They also said on this day that Celine Dion's rendition of AC/DC's You Shook Me All Night Long was the worst cover version of a record ever recorded. We're not playing that one. James Golden, Snerdley, keep it right here. Fastest hour in American media.
The Rush Hour with James Golden on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Rush Hour with James Golden, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Are you predisposed to consider staying on and having a vibrant campaign through November?
I am qualified. I have an independent line. That's done. And I am right now assessing that landscape and looking at the information, talking to people, talking to the stakeholders in my campaign about what that general election is going to look like. I can tell you there are a lot of people who have a lot of concerns.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who have a lot of concerns. Oh, I don't know whether we're going to be able to get to this either. Chris Cuomo, Andy's brother, lit up the Democrats today. His own party. Today's the anniversary of Gary U.S. Bonds going to a 2-week stay at the number one position in the U.S. charts. With this one, Coda to 3. Bruce Springsteen did a cover of this song. Maryland in the news. Prosecutors have told the government, government attorneys, they are playing such games. The Justice Department just said, hey, you know what? This guy, Abrego Garcia, we are going to deport him not back to El Salvador. We're going to send him to a third country. And now Democrat judges, the scheming that's going on to protect this immigrant. In Nashville, the judge down there said, okay, you can release him, but then she's keeping him in custody a few more days so that ICE can't get him. She's afraid ICE is going to deport him anyway. That's not even the concern of the court. They are playing political games, and Maryland's court is involved. It's a mess. Fastest hour in American media, James Golden, Snerdley. We are going to talk about this budget reconciliation stuff that's going on with the big, beautiful bill. And more. So don't go away.
The Rush Hour with James Golden on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Rush Hour with James Golden, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Birthday today for Mick Jones, guitarist and singer with The Clash. Of course, this is their big one. "1991" was first released in 82, went to number one across the pond in 1991. It's amazing. Yeah, The Clash. Should I stay or should I go? All right, now let's get really quick. We got so much audio, and I want to get to some of it, but I got to just do a little bit of this, even if we don't get to it all. Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonald has rejected key Medicaid provisions in the Senate GOP big, beautiful bill, and she did that on the grounds, of course, if this holds, this is going to be huge, because the bill has to go back for reconciliation with the House, and she shot down a provision in it that proposes to cap states' use of health care provider taxes to collect more federal Medicaid funding, a provision that is championed by the conservatives that would generate billions of dollars in savings in Medicaid. Of course, that comes at the same time as part of this bill where there are tax cuts. Now, she is one of 6, this woman. There were instantly calls for her to be fired. She was appointed Senate parliamentarian in 2012, first woman, but only the 6th parliamentarian ever. So how did we get to here? How do we get to where this woman, and it doesn't matter that she's a woman, but this person who is not elected by anybody, has so much power? Well, the first thing, obviously, and many of you know this, the Senate doesn't have to listen to her. The parliamentarian is an advisory role. It has been in place since 1935. But it's strictly an advisory role. They advise. Not only do they advise on things like this, but when you see, for instance, if you ever watch C-SPAN 2 and you watch the Senate and you see whoever's doing the pro temp work that day, some of them don't know exactly what they're doing, and they always lean over and a person's talking to them. That's the parliamentarian, letting them know what the Senate rules are on certain things, what the process is. Now, this woman was a lawyer. Her job there is to interpret Senate rules and procedures. She's also known as that person advising on the process for counting the Electoral College certificates. And most of her rulings, like most of these, and this is when a parliamentarian comes up, it's always 9 times out of 10, when they make the news, it's about the Byrd rule. Well, what is the Byrd rule? If I were to explain the Byrd rule in depth, we'd be here in depth. We would be here until tomorrow. The Byrd rule is a process that happens during reconciliation. Well, what's reconciliation? Reconciliation is a procedure under the Congressional Budget Act of 1974. None of this existed the way it is now before 1974. 1974, which deals with mainly spending and revenue bills. And believe it or not, the reconciliation bill rules were put in place so that we could get to smaller deficits. Trillions and trillions of dollars of more deficit spending later, we're still not there. But that's where these rules come in. And the skinny of it is that in this reconciliation process, what happened was that senators were throwing in all kinds of things in these beautiful bills, like earmarks, like other things that had really nothing to do with deficit reduction or anything. So Senator Byrd and a few of his cronies got together and they made a rule. They defined 6 different provisions of what constitutes extemporaneous matter. And that stuff means if you have stuff that wasn't germane to the bill, then it could be excluded. The person that, and there's a long, complicated, which we could get into, but I won't, there's a complicated process to bring the point of order so that then you can say, okay, is this a Byrd rule situation? That process was gone through. And it was determined that, yes, this Medicaid spending was a parliamentary issue. That's why the parliamentarian made the decision that she made. But this Byrd rule, by the way, was about, it didn't state as a permanent rule until the 90s. There had been a lot of tweaks on it. But it began in 1985. And the purpose of the amendment was to protect the effectiveness of the reconciliation process by avoiding and getting rid of things that weren't germane to what was needed for reconciliation, which was supposed to be, how do you cut the deficit? according to the reconciliation bill of 1974. So he says, I said, this stuff gets in the weeds. But anyway, long story short, people are demanding, fire her, fire her, fire her. Thune has said today he's not going to do that. Now, the parliamentarians are supposed to be nonpartisan. Has Elizabeth McDonald ruled in a nonpartisan way? One could make the argument that she has. She has hurt Democrat ideologues, too, with some of her rulings, including one you might remember, where the Democrats wanted to force through this phony immigration reform under budget reconciliation, some of the provisions. And she just said, nope, not allowed. Byrd rule doesn't allow it. Democrats were furious with her. The same way Republicans today are furious with her. Republicans have the right, if they so choose, and by the way, in researching this, I went through all the history of how minority leaders and when minority leaders and majority leaders came through. You know, that stuff didn't start till the 1920s. The country operated fine without all of this current structure that you see in the Senate has been layered on from the last 100 years or so. A lot of it. But there is a double-edged sword in firing a parliamentarian that does rule against both sides. One day, your side's going to be out of power, too. I'm not saying what they should do. I'm saying that there are arguments to and for, but Republicans do have the power to ask their Senate majority leader to get rid of this woman. And I have not had time to do enough research to go through yet. I am looking at it, all of the rulings that she's made, to see whether there is a bias that is clear, present, and showing. So that's the long and short version of In the Weeds. But one day, if I had time, boy, I really want to pour through this whole reconciliation process. 'Cause I'm going to tell you something, folks. Everything that is set up now in Congress is set up to do things the easy way. I keep saying, and I have been saying, Congress needs a return to regular order. We had 13 different appropriations bills that used to get handled one at a time. A lot of this stuff would be avoided if there was a serious return to regular order, bills passed, individuals signed, and not shoved into these big omnibus packages that require, under the rule, reconciliation. So, okay, there's it in the weeds today. Let's leave the weeds. Let's get on with Pete. Pete Hegseth scorched the media. Boy, my phone was like breaking this morning. Princess Di was texting me. It was like, this presser is fantastic. At the time, I was occupied. I was like, what's going on? What's going on? I had to look and see what's going on. Well, this is what was going on this morning.
Because you, and I mean specifically you, the press, specifically you, the press corps,
to their faces,
because you cheer against Trump so hard. It's like in your DNA and in your blood to cheer against Trump. Because you want him not to be successful so bad, you have to cheer against the efficacy of these strikes. You have to hope maybe they weren't effective. Maybe the way the Trump administration has represented them isn't true. So let's take half-truths, spun information, leaked information, and then spin it. Spin it in every way we can to try to cause doubt and manipulate the public mind over whether or not our brave pilots were successful. How many stories have been written about how hard it is to, fly a plane for 36 hours? Has MSNBC done that story? Has Fox? Have we done the story how hard that is? Have we done it 2 or 3 times? so that American people understand? How about how difficult it is to shoot a drone from an F-15 or 16 or F-22 or F-35? Or what it's like to man a Patriot battery? Or how hard it is to refuel midair? Giving the American people an understanding of how complex and sophisticated this mission really was. There are so many aspects of what our brave men and women did that because of the hatred of this press corps are undermined because your people are trying to leak and spin that it wasn't successful. It's irresponsible. And folks in this room are privy to that information because of the proximity here in the Pentagon. It's an important responsibility. And time again, classified information is leaked or peddled for political purposes to try to make the president look bad. And what's really happening is you're undermining the success of incredible B-2 pilots and incredible F-35 pilots and incredible refuelers and incredible air defenders who accomplished their mission, set back a nuclear program in ways that other presidents would have dreamed. How about we celebrate that? How about we talk about how special America is, that only we have these capabilities? I think it's too much to ask, unfortunately, for the fake news. So we're used to that. But we also have an opportunity to stand at the podium and read the truth of what's really happening. And the reality is you want to call it destroyed, you want to call it defeated, you want to call it obliterated. Choose your word. This was an historically successful attack, and we should celebrate it as Americans. And it gives us a chance to have peace, chance to have a deal, and an opportunity to prevent a nuclear Iran, which is something President Trump talked about for 20 years.
That was just the start of it. I have more. I just don't have time to play it today, so I'm going to hold the rest until tomorrow. If I have to choose one other thing to play very briefly today, I want to play Chris Cuomo going off on the Democrat Party. Cut 6, Chris Cuomo today.
How do you keep them from having the nuke? Impeach Trump is the opposite of having a better idea. You're killing your party. You're killing your party. And look, I hope it works out for you. I hope you guys splinter off and become, whatever you really are. Because you're not a capitalist and you're not a Democrat. And, you can say, well, what do you know? I was raised by a real one. I was raised by a real one. Go ahead and criticize Mario Cuomo. What's going to be your biggest insult? That he spawned me and Andrew? Is that going to be the best you have? Because you ain't compared to him. Not in terms of intelligence, not in terms of success, not in terms of pedigree, not in terms of philosophy, not in terms of mission, not in terms of eloquence, not in terms of charisma, not in terms of anything. Certainly not electability. You are killing your party because you are not a real one. Because you're doing what's good for you in a vacuum with your little social media following. You're no different than a pod bro. And you're killing your party. And Democrats better wake the up and realize that you're better than this. Be with the 80, not the 20. Okay?
Yes. Chris, a little hot. Birthday today also, Ariana Grande. Born in 1993. This young lady has sold over 90 million records worldwide, the 5th highest certified digital singles female artist. She is quite the talent. James Golden, Snerdley, on the fastest hour in American media. Coming back. Don't you go away. Be here.
The Rush Hour with James Golden on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Rush Hour with James Golden on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So I didn't vote for Trump, but I'm beginning to wish I did, because in the last 5 or so days, he bombed Iran, destroyed their nuclear capabilities, brokered a peace deal, and said on CNN.
Birthday today for an American great, Billy Davis Jr. Billy Davis Jr. and his wife, Marilyn McCoo, were both members of the Fifth Dimension. After the Fifth Dimension days, they went on to do several records as a duo, husband and wife duo. Billy Davis Jr., Marilyn McCoo. You Don't Have to Be a Star was their big one. I Hope We Get to Love in Time. But I'll tell you what, I was mentioning this to Jonas, if you have never seen these two and heard their story, it is an amazing story of faith, perseverance, and wow, they're quite the couple. Happy birthday, Billy Davis Jr. James Golden and Snerdley, before we get out of here, let me just play you one other thing. This is out of L.A. There's the L.A. Tenant Union. Here's a CBS report on what they're up to.
Continue. The LA Tenants Union is calling for an eviction moratorium. They say thousands of immigrants will be unable to pay their bills come July 1st because avoiding detainment is taking priority over going to work.
This militarization of our community, this occupation of our community, this terrorizing of our communities have closed down businesses, have taken away street vendors, have separated families, and then people cannot pay their rent. They have barely the minimum to survive. We need the city to put a rent freeze. We need the city to protect tenants that are going to be suffering this 1st of July when they're going to be receiving 3-day notices because they cannot pay their rent.
The union is also calling for a citywide day of action and organization on July the 1st.
So now, in addition to everything else that legal residents of not just L.A., but the country, but specifically L.A., now legal residents of L.A. should pay, because that's who pay. They're saying the city should. The city should. The city does with taxpayer money. The city doesn't print their own dollar bills. The city takes dollar bills from people who pay the taxes. So now, the people that actually are in Los Angeles, legal citizens of the United States of America, should now be forced to pay the rent. Because it's not just like, okay, there's a rent moratorium. We saw this during COVID days. As much as they would like to tell landlords to shove it where the sun doesn't shine, they can't. They have to try to come up with some way to offer some compensation. And who pays for that? You do, the taxpayers. So now, on top of everything else, it's your fault. You're terrorizing people that break the law, and now you should pay their rent. We got to go. May God bless, protect each and every single one of you, your families, your loved ones. God's willing, we're back here tomorrow. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Bo Snerdley's Rush Hour. You can hear Bo Snerdley's Rush Hour weekdays at 4 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
77 WABC invites you to a family fun day and softball showdown on July 20th with net proceeds benefiting Shriners Children's. John Sterling will call the game as the FDNY takes on the NYPD with special guests Dwight Gooden, Art Shamsky, 77 WABC hosts including Sid Rosenberg, Anthony Cumia, Lionel, Dominic Carter, and many more. For more info and to buy tickets, go to ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. That's ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org.